'Tis I, Dr. Dementia, and I am an alchemist. I mean, I'm a black mage, but the point being is I have to use alchemy to fix black magic, and this is not gonna end well. We already know how well this has gone for this koala, and I really just want to help.
I sense your weakness.
But anyway, speaking of alchemy, it is the next expansion of Dominion that we're going to discuss. The third expansion of Dominion, to be precise. And while the last two, Intrigue and Seaside, were big fat expansions, this is going to be a mini one, and we're going to only be talking about 12 cards. Well, 13 if you count the added new feature that was introduced only in this expansion. We'll get into that in a moment, but it is all about alchemy. And with that, let's begin!
Full Metal Alchemist.
So before we can begin discussing all the cards that are in Alchemy, I do have to discuss the major mechanic that was added to this expansion. And that is actually in the form of a brand new treasure simply called Potion. Costing 4 to purchase, it generates, instead of coin, those little potion icons you see on the top left and top right corner. Now, what this also does is sets up a new supply pile for the potions because there are multiple that you can purchase. And the reason for that is 10 out of the 12 alchemy cards, in addition to costing coin, also require the potion in order to purchase the item. That means that depending on the number of alchemy-based cards you use in your kingdom supply pile, regardless of the downsize the purchase use in a turn to purchase this card, it is essentially becomes a requirement, and one that you have to commit early to in order to take advantage of the majority of these cards. Which means this should be one of your first critical purchases that you should be making when you have quite a few number of alchemy cards to play with. That being said, you could essentially upgrade into a potion from a silver or even something like an astrolabe, but you might as well just purchase it. Early on, you might need just one if you're very fortunate and you're reshuffling in order to get this card out quick enough to purchase quite a few number of the kingdom cards. Now, you could cycle, you could just put it on top of your deck, you could try to wishing well this thing if you could, but you do need it. Well, again, 10 out of the 12 cards require the potion to purchase, so it does make this more of an essential card rather than an optional one. So you're gonna need to really think about your turns when you're trying to get the potion, because if your goal is to purchase alchemy cards, you need it in your hand. If there's ways around to getting that card, sure, go for it that way. Just make sure that you present it with your treasures in order to get it. And with that, we'll start talking about the new cards in the set. 12 in total for it being a mini expansion. And we're going to go right into it. The first card of the set is the Alchemist! If you got the reference, thank you very much. Hit that like button. Costing 3 and a potion to purchase, plus 2 cards, plus 1 action. At the start of your cleanup phase this turn, if you have a potion in play, you may put this onto your deck. Now, right off the bat, this is essentially a slight upgrade to Laboratory. And I say slight for a couple of reasons. First off, the monetary cost goes from 5 for Laboratory to 3 with Alchemist, which is fantastic. However, you do need the potion in order to get that, so the cost might not come out as great as that. However, plus 2 cards, plus 1 action, as I said in Laboratory, is very good for draw power and best in thinning out your decks. But it's that added effect that works wonders. And if you are stacking up potions to build up a nice alchemic deck, depending on what's on the supply piles, or if you just want to get all the alchemists, you are pretty much top decking this card every single time you have a potion out there. And even if you play the potion and don't purchase anything requiring the potion, just having it in play activates the effect. Now, that is fantastic for just being able to thin out your deck, and it's another reason why you want to make sure you can get potions out as quickly as possible. You know, searching through your junk, and basically, it works great. you know, you'll find that there's another card in this set that works wonders with this, but one I will mention that is fantastic for this card is Outpost, because when you draw into that 3 cards for your second turn, and you have Alchemist out there, you're drawing back up to a full hand, and having a good stack of these is not a bad thing. You just have to be careful if you are relying on top decking this so much, because if you do, you could be vulnerable for a lot of attacks. Militia especially, Minion can basically screw you over, and Masquerade could potentially force you to get rid of one of these. Basically getting curses through Sea Witch is another liability that you have to be careful about. So you want to balance it out with some good cards, but in terms of draw power, it's a very good card. For its cost, especially if you commit to the potion early on in your 3-4 split or 5-2 split, this is an early game card because you'll have access to the potion a lot quicker than you will in a mid-game or late game. And if you can get at least another potion or 2 and stack up the Alchemist, you're looking great for that draw power. You're getting to those treasures. It's a major deal. I like it. Keep to it as an early game choice. If you're in the mid-game and you're considering this option, it's only because the game's going either too slow or there's not enough cards that are providing draw power. So keep that in mind as well. Next up, we have Apothecary, costing 2 and a potion to purchase, plus 1 card, plus 1 action. Reveal the top 4 cards of your deck, put the coppers and potions into your hand, put the rest back in any order. Now, right off the bat, this screams deck inspection, and this should remind you of 2 specific cards from Intrigue, both the version 1.0 and 2.0, Scout and Patrol, because while those were specifically set up for victory cards and victory and or curses, this is specifically set up for your potions and your coppers, but they work the same exact way. You're basically drawing into your deck a little bit. Now, you get a plus 1 card, plus 1 action before you do the inspection, which is very useful, and it's a slight upgrade from Scout, so this already makes it very nice. The cost is, well worth the price at that point, even with the potion, because this is still a very early game card. Apothecary is going to very likely get you to draw cards, because 9 times out of 10, if you get this purchase early on, you don't have much in your deck other than estates and coppers and maybe a potion or 2, which is fantastic because then you can pull into them a lot easier and build up decks a lot quicker. Now, Coppersmith and Moneylender are a good follow-up on this card because you do have the action to generate into it, so you can either trash or take advantage of Coppersmith's effect very early on. Knowing what's on the top of your deck is also useful, so Wishing Well is a very good effect, and Native Village as well, if you know what's coming up. Otherwise, stick to the Wishing Well. This is also good for suiting up with Warehouse, just drawing into your deck as much as possible, regardless of the discard, and just getting ready to just amass your handful of treasures. This is helpful when you have multiple cards in your deck, and you know you will eventually reach a point where you will not get your next Apothecary in time. That's why Warehouse is useful for that effect. Again, early game card, and this can also be a mid game card. Don't get me wrong. This is more useful early on when you are relying heavily on coppers. So comboing it with Moneylender, Coppersmith, any of those cards, pretty good. I've already talked about Patrol. I've talked about Scout. Those are good cards to a point. Patrol more than Scout, to be fair, but this is awesome because this is specifically for your coppers and for any potions you have, which will make purchasing other alchemy-based cards very much more successful. So definitely a good choice here. Next on the list, we have the first of the only 2 Kingdom cards in the set that do not require a potion to purchase, and that is Apprentice. Costing 5 to purchase, plus 1 action. Trash a card from your hand, plus 1 card per 1 it costs, plus 2 cards if it has potion in its cost. Now, it is an expensive trasher, like Replace, even Remodel to a point, but it has a more unique effect rather than those guys where they would be upgrading cards. In this particular case, you have some draw power here. Now, this is very good if you can get it early on, especially in a 5-2 split, because this is very good at getting rid of estates, which costs 2 coin per cost, so automatically you are getting 2 per draw power, generating some extra currency early on. That alone makes this pair very well with Moneylender, who can also generate some coin by getting rid of those coppers. Now, eventually, like Moneylender, once you run out of estates, it's going to be weak, and therefore you're going to be looking at options that will allow you to provide some fodder for Apprentice easily. There are some action cards that you could get rid of, such as Moneylender, where you could just trash that for its cost. There might be a alchemy card that requires the potion, or if you realize you might have bought, for example, one too many alchemists, then you get 3 cards for the coin and then an extra 2 because of that potion. That +1 action helps because it gets you to continue through your combos and into your engine a little bit easier. Apprentice, it does technically care about the potion cost. It's really relevant because outside of Alchemy, those are the only cards that benefit from that +2 effect. And there are other cards that we will go into down the line as well in other expansions where this can work really great. But Apprentice, you know, when it reaches a point in the game, it stops being useful as a gainer. It just becomes a very powerful draw card, because if you realize, well, you can purchase provinces very quickly and you have a ton of golds in your hand, well, here's +6 cards. You really have to just take a look at your hand each time you play Apprentice and see if it's worth it. Again, in an early game, especially on a 5-2 split, and this is one of your first purchases, this becomes very useful to start generating some extra currency from drawing into your remaining coppers by using Apprentice on those estates. Again, if Moneylender is a good option that is available for you, combo off of it as well. I mean, as a trasher, yes, you can get rid of curses, but they're only going to cost nothing. So you won't get to draw out of it, you'll just get the trash. And at that point, you're looking at better trashing cards. This will have a much more viable of use down the line as we talk about other cards. But for the time being, when we're considering the base game and just the first 3 expansions, it's got its niche uses. You're basically looking at your hand, determining what's good and what's not. And that will be your timing to use it. And next up we have Familiar. Familiar costs 3 and a potion to purchase, +1 card, +1 action. Each other player gains a curse. Now, effects like these remind me of Great Hall, where it's a +1 card, +1 action, and then something else happens. In that case, it was a victory point. In this case, each other player gains a curse. Now, while that might be very useful, considering some of the other curse generators could cost a little bit more, they all had some more interesting effects. I mean, even Embargo to a point did. But this has its uses if played quickly and early on. You just have to make sure you have the potion in hand with that 3 coin. The main theme I want to go over with these cards is that the reason why you don't see potions after this expansion is because it made this a very slow mechanic. I don't think so to a degree. Yeah, you waste a turn spending a potion, but there are ways around it, and I'll go over that in a second. But going back into Familiar, this is very good early game when you are able to get at least 2 or 3 quickly enough that you basically flood your opponent's deck with curses so fast that they might not have much time to react, and this might cause them to lose out on some crucial coin generation to purchase much better cards. Now, this can be offset by some very cheap trashers, and Chapel is a good use there. And even Masquerade has a potential good use here about passing over the curses. Because once the curses are run out, then all this provides is a +1 card, +1 action. And that's it. I mean, which is not great, but you could say use Apprentice or even Salvager to just trash the card for some added benefit in terms of card draw power or even currency. Now, one thing I should mention, and this applies to all of the potion-related alchemy cards, even if it costs a potion to purchase, you can work around that little offset. If you didn't want to purchase a potion and you saw, say, oh, I don't know, Lurker, and trashing it and then using it again to gain it, you don't have to have the potion in order to do that. Now, of course, with the Alchemist, the potion benefits from the effect. And, I mean, technically, fuck nuggets, what the... Apprentice is the same way, but, you know, there are ways to offset the potion cost, and with most of these cards using potions, it comes into play very quickly. So that is something to consider when you look at some of these other cards. But for Curse Generation, very early game card, because you can get these out quickly, and if you have more than one in hand, you can just play them back to back to back. For the record, 10 potions per supply for the supply pile. So, not 10 potions. Wow, 10 curses for the supply pile, and that's why any later than early game, and this is basically going to be trash fodder for you. So if you can't take advantage of it, you're going to want to figure out a way to trash the card after the fact. An okay card, I would say. Next up, we have probably one of the most interesting cards in this expansion, Golem. Golem costing 4 and the potion to purchase. Reveal cards from your deck until you reveal 2 action cards other than Golems. Discard the other cards, then play the action cards in either order. Now, right off the bat, this disrespects all other Golems. How dare this card! But other than that, this is a card set up for a very heavy action-oriented deck, because you're basically shifting through your deck. You are basically milling and sifting through until you can get some actions that you can play. Now, this is great for when you're using actions to generate some of your treasure, market, festival, that sort of thing, even coppersmith, moneylender, yada yada yada, depending on what's on your hand. However, this has some drawbacks. First off, it's 4 and then the potion, so if you combine the two, it's an 8 cost card essentially. So it can be slightly expensive, and playing Golem has a risk of drawing into basically 2 cards that end up giving you no extra actions, or what I would like to call as terminals, and basically ending your action phase prematurely, which is probably not what you want to do with most engines. So it could also play a detrimental effect, such as forcing you to trash cards that you don't want to trash. And basically, this is not set up to combo itself by looking at the text there. You can only play these 2 action cards. You can't play other golems that pop up as a result of that. So it makes it difficult to play them multiple times in a turn. And to be fair, those golems that you draw as a result of Golem's effect are going to get discarded. So you have to hope you have another one in your hand to pull off them. You need some slow draw power. And it's random. It is very random. It's like a village, because it's a village specifically set up for actions. It's an action village. To quote Donald X. Vaccarino, particularly for this card, which I don't like doing all the time, but it makes sense. You worry more about what exactly is in your deck when any of it may leap out at you when you play Golem. The fun thing, of course, is to have to play a card trash that you may not want to, such as Apprentice. Something is going to go down, and that's the thing. You are not going to know unless you've played a card that allows you to inspect your deck. That way you know if it's worth playing Golem or not. Now, granted, again, if it's an action-heavy deck, and you know you can generate currency using Golem's effect, then by all means, go for it. I'm not going to stop you. This can be fun in all the right ways, and worst case, if things don't work out so well, Apprentice, Salvager, Chapel, your trashes are going to start coming into play to get rid of it. And if you feel like your opponent could have a shittier time with Golem, masquerade it over. Nothing wrong with that. You just need to make sure you know when to play it. Now, as a result of the cost, If potions are your more immediate purchase, this could be a very early game card, but I would not recommend it. Mid game at the very earliest, because you do need actions to set this up. And I don't recommend going more than 2 because of the fact that you're really only using a golem at a time. You're gonna go through your deck quick enough if you're not very action heavy, or you filled it up to the brim with multiple actions. But at that point, you're gonna lose out if you don't have extra actions to play on each turn. So keep that in mind. Again, mid-game card, I wouldn't even touch this in the late game. And don't even go for it in the early game, unless you want to have it before you start drawing into the actions that you know is going to build into your engine. This has a lot of cons, but the randomness is also a pro. So play it as you see fit. Next, we have the second of the 2 cards that do not require a potion to purchase in this set, and that is Herbalist. Costing 2 to purchase, +1 buy, +1 coin. Once this turn, when you discard a treasure from play, you may put it onto your deck. Now, right off the bat, a plus buy is nothing to scoff at. Never is, because honestly, Market is useful for this, Festival is wonderful for this, and even Woodcutter is another good option to take advantage of when it comes to those extra buys. A buy always helps. Now, while those are some good effects they have some additional power to them, the +1 coin, it's a give or take. That other effect, where you can put a treasure onto your deck, limited use, because basically, unless it's a gold, or maybe sometimes a silver, you really don't want to be able to do that. Now, that's normally the case. However, this does have a good synergy with another card of the set, and that's Alchemist. Now, Alchemist uses potions for its effect to get top deck. Now, because it's a potion, the potion's a treasure, therefore using Herbalist alongside it means that the potion can also go on top of your deck. Therefore, you can repeat Alchemist's effect again and purchase another Herbalist. So you could draw off of Alchemist and Herbalist constantly to continuously get those effects as much as possible. Now, eventually you're going to run out of actions, so you need multiple actions to take advantage of it. This does require a slight bit of setup, and this is one of the few that works well with it. However, if the treasure doesn't get discarded, then you can't really take advantage of Herbalist. An example of this is Astrolabe, because it's a treasure duration. It's going to stay on the field, so you can't do it with that. You can do it on the turn it gets discarded, but not the turn you play Astrolabe. So keep that part in mind right there. You can also, and of course, Throne Room, another decent choice here to double up on everything, which means you're able to put 2 discarded treasures back into play, which makes it so that you could put a potion in something else if you did have Alchemist available to you. It makes your draw power a little bit better, which also makes Outpost slightly more useful in this case as well. Now, with that in mind, this is good in the early game for an extra coin and the extra buy, plus its cheap cost makes it quick enough for you to take advantage of until you get a potion, or when you get a potion. Mid-game, when you have something set up where you have Alchemist as a good choice, or you have some heavy treasure. If you're considering this in the late game, you're probably in a bad position right now, because you really don't need the extra coin or the extra buy unless you can generate enough treasure to buy more than 1 province, because at that point you need to be able to take the lead over your opponent. So early game or mid game. Definitely not a late game card though. Now, Potion wasn't the only new treasure that was added. There was actually another one that was added to this expansion, and that is the Philosopher's Stone. Costing 3 and a potion to purchase. For the amount of coin in those question marks, you count your deck and discard pile plus 1 coin per 5 cards total between them, rounded down. Now, you're starting to get Garden vibes for this, because this relies on your deck total as well as your discard pile combined, which, yeah, if your deck is big enough, sure. 20 cards produces 4 coin. Lovely. Even 25 produces 5. I would not rely heavily too much on this card, because first off, it requires basically having a large deck with poor draw power, which automatically tells you there's not really great options for engines to really work this card in. Because, first off, you're not going to know when this card is coming up if you buy only one or two of them, and you still have to draw into them. That being said, I mean, it's great if you were able to use Herbalist to put it onto the top of your deck. You could do it that way and continuously play into it, but then again, you need to play into Herbalist. And for it to really shine through, you need at least 20 cards, because you want this to be at least a strong enough contender for your golds. And you want it to just basically replace a gold. Anything less than that, and it's not great. That also brings me to my other issue with the card, and that's the cost altogether. 3 coins and then the potion. You would have to literally make this card at least cost 4 or 5. So your deck already needs to be big enough in size, so you still have to draw into the potion. There will be cards down the line where having treasures can count toward victory points, and again, I bring up Gardens as an example because it's the exact same effect. But the big thing here is, in order for Philosopher's Stone to be a good option, you need a large deck with a poor draw, since cards in play or in your hand don't count for the coin, and that is an important rule clarification that I need to bring up, because you could play a card in your hand and it will affect the amount of the Philosopher's Stone effect. So automatically, you need more than the 20, because you need to be able to play at least one to still be able to use Philosopher's Stone's effect. So it only counts your deck and discard pile, not your hand, and not what's on the field. So automatically, you're losing out on potential coin generation. There is not many uses where this will work, but I'm not going to scoff at it, because if you like Gardens, you'll like this as well. So this is basically heavily dependent on what is in the supply piles. If you do not have maximum draw power, or you do not have multiple action engines coming into play, this is where Philosopher's Stone can shine, and I recommend picking up a couple of these, because if it's going to take you a while to generate golds, this is going to be an alternative if you can stack up your deck with a few of these. And duplicates do count for the count itself, so keep that in mind. This can be good. If you're going to go with that late early game into the mid game, this, don't even waste it on the late game, because at this point, if you have to purchase a Philosopher's Stone, you're in for a slog. That's all I'm going to say. So the next card we're going to discuss is not only the most expensive card of the expansion, it's also the first one that has been treated as a ban card by default in a few online versions of Dominion. This is going to require a lot of explanation, a lot of rule clarification before we can get into some potential synergy work and other, other opinions on the card. It's called Possession, costing 6 to purchase and a potion as well. The player to your left takes an extra turn after this one, in which you can see all cards they can and make all decisions for them. Any cards or debt, that hexagon symbol means debt, I'll explain that in a second, they would gain on that turn, you gain instead. Any card of theirs that are trashed are set aside and put in their discard pile at the end of the turn. Now this is a lot to take in, but I'm going to explain the first thing first. That hexagon symbol is debt. You're not going to see it on any cards in these early expansions here, not until we get down later in the line with some other expansions. You will find that some cards have a debt cost rather than an actual treasure cost. That allows you to pick up the card at any time, regardless of how much treasure you have, but you earn a debt of the amount that is in that number there, in which case you have to pay off that debt first before you can purchase anything else. That's all. I'll go into detail on that one. But just so you know, you'll see that mechanic later in some other expansions. Now, before I go into my opinion on the card as well as synergies, let's further break this down a little bit with some rule FAQs, essentially, just so you know what to expect with this card. First off, this is not a duration card like Outpost, in which you gain an extra turn through your opponent because it is discarded after the cleanup phase. It's not a duration. Second of all, it is can be cumulative. You can play more than once on a turn. So if you do play, for example, 2 of them, you will get 2 extra turns. It is not an attack card, so you cannot block it like Moat. Basically, if you played a possession through your opponent on your possessed turn, they will get a possessed turn, and then everything goes back to normal. If you were possessed and you played an outpost during your normal turn, you will not take an extra turn. And since your opponent can't get any cards gained on the possession turn, anything that cared about how many cards were gained will never trigger. That's more along the line for what you see here. And then gainer cards like Remodel, Upgrade, Replace, Workshop, Ironworks, if they cared about what cards they gained, these cards didn't gain a card, so they will do nothing. For example, if you possess someone and have them play Replace and gain a province, they didn't gain a victory card, so no curses are given out. You are the one in the end that gained it. So you can offset some effects that way, just to help you mitigate it. Those are quite a few number of rules. I suggest at this point, if you want further clarification, check the wiki on this card. It is vitally important that you read this. If you are going to use it in like casual gaming, just know by default it is a banned card in some online versions of the game. I have yet to check the Steam version to see if that is the case by default. I believe it's not, but you can set it up. Oh boy, that was a lot to take in. Anyway, with that out of the way, now I can go into my personal opinion. This is a very powerful card, but because of this giant rule set for it, it is an unusual one. First off, while it is not on the surface an attack card, technically the way it works kinda is. So you can really cause some chaos, more so than any of the cards that have been seen. Hell, this causes more chaos than Golem, and could potentially synergize quite well with Golem as a result of it. That cost, however, is a big downside of the card, and which is why you will probably not see this go into effect super crazy until you're mid-game at the very earliest. But that isn't to say Lurker and even bridging to gain the card a little bit sooner is much more beneficial. So yeah, this is basically a way to not only give yourself some extra benefit for a turn, possibly more if you play more than one possession, but this also gives you some added support to basically screw with your opponent's deck or hand in a way that will never benefit them. Remember, the one downside to this card is anything that is technically trash that you play through your opponent is only temporary, so they will regain that. So they won't lose those cards permanently. They will just lose it for the turn, but it will come back into their discard pile. So that is a big thing to keep in mind. There is a reason why this card is banned, because if you play this enough times, even through a throne room, you basically will fuck with your opponent long enough that they won't want to touch the card themselves. But I could go into ways that this could work out well for you. Basically, Masquerade is a good option where you could basically control everything they do and give yourself a much better hand. The trash for benefit effects such as Remodel, Apprentice, Salvager, those are temporary effects, so Chapel would be also temporary as well. But you could also remodel a Providence to gain yourself a Providence for yourself. So remember, anything gained, you're going to get advantage of it regardless if everything for them is temporary. And cards like Council Room, which gives your opponent a benefit in the case of drawing a card, is just as useful also, because you'll be able to use it on that same turn without any repercussions also. There are other rulings about this card, but overall, like I said, this is basically designed to benefit you and screw with your opponent only for a temporary reason. Now remember, keep in mind, if they have possession and you play it through them, they will possess your next turn. So you don't want to do that. You want to make sure that if you're going to possess, you want to possess it on your turn no matter what, even if you play more than one. The one thing I will mention is, considering the power that this card has, you bet there should not be any added effects to this. It is already strong enough as it is. So plus actions would make this completely broken, and I would never see this come in. It would be banned outright just for having everything else besides that. This at least gives you an opportunity to try the card, and you can understand why it's like this. Overall, it is a broken card, and there again, this shows you another reason why potion-type cards did not last longer than this expansion, I'll tell you that right now. Next, I think we have probably one of the most powerful cards of this set, and I mean it in terms of reliability, and that's Scrying Pool, costing 2 and a potion to purchase, plus 1 action. Each player, including you, reveals a top card of their deck and either discards it or puts it back, your choice. Then reveal cards from your deck until revealing one that isn't an action. Put all of those revealed cards into your hand. Right off the bat, another card that is basically an upgrade from a previous card in another in the base game, actually. This is an upgrade to Spy, which I think is actually a lot better off than Spy is itself. First off, you have the Spy effect, obviously, and you got plus 1 action right off the bat, so you don't lose your action after playing the card. It is that second effect that turns this more slightly into a better version of Patrol. So I think this is a hybrid between Spy and Patrol, and this is a good one at that. You're basically revealing cards until you get one that isn't an action, and then you put all of those cards in your hand. With having a plus 1 action, you have options at that point, and that means that you could potentially have an unlimited draw deck and keep drawing into your deck over and over and over again. And what I like about this card is, even with the potion, which is probably the one downside about purchasing the card, Lurker is another option if you have the right Kingdom cards, that 2 cost is going to be viable for you to get as quickly as possible, because you will basically work some magic here. Steward, good option to come off of this card. Very fantastic synergy. Harbinger also has very good synergy with this card. This also helps you set up junking attacks as well. Basically, anything that relies heavily on action cards is going to be a lovely thing. You basically want to prioritize this as soon as possible, and that cost is one of the downsides. Because it has the potion, you need the potion first, then you get Scrying Pool, and then bada bing, you get started there. And then you basically have to make sure you keep the potion in your deck to get more Scrying Pool. So this is basically turning into Alchemist or even Herbalist. You want to make sure you continuously have potions in there. So you may need more than 2 if you want to go through this a lot. And every single time, you're only going to be able to get Scrying Pool when you have it available to you. It is a relatively small effect when you look at the card's overall strength. I mean, it's useful sifting at the start where you reveal the top card, so that you can discard a non-action card there to make it miss the shuffle and increase your odds of drawing more cards. But basically, this is where you want to be able to trash anything that isn't an action card in order to benefit from it. So you need those terminal coin card actions to really make this shine. And you really want to pull it out when you have basically an engine up and running. So if you already have some cards in your hand that you know you can take advantage of, you want to trash them, this is where Replace is great, Salvager is great, anything works well with this. But this is an early game card, possibly mid game as well, but you want to get it as soon as possible to build up your engine, because this goes with everything else involved. Next card is actually a very interesting one, and I think it's for its effect and it's for its cost. Transmute. Transmute simply costs the potion to purchase. You trash a card from your hand. If it's an action card, you gain a duchy. If it's a treasure card, you gain a transmute. Or if it's a victory card, you gain a gold. Now, this is one of the more specifically unique trash for benefit cards you will see out there. Replace, remodel, and upgrade. Those are a little bit more flexible, while this is basically just specific for basically giving you one specific thing for everything you do. Now, it is somewhat cheaper when you think about all you need is a potion to really take advantage of this. And yeah, you could essentially get this early on, start trashing your estates for gold. That's great. You could also, if you don't need the potions anymore, gain another transmute. Fine by me. unless the action card is going to benefit you. If it's like a coppersmith or a moneylender, yeah, sure, gain a little bit more victory power. Then you could use Transmute on the victory card on the duchy in order to gain another gold. So this has, you know, some setup. This is a good thinner. This is also a last resort as a thinner to handle curses, which is probably one of its weakest effects. And especially if you're playing a game where you have a familiar on the field, then this is going to be great too. And as for turning treasures into transmutes, it basically works well with cards that interact with the action. So a Scrying Pool is a good choice there. And you could basically transmute other transmutes for duchies to score in the end game. But that's basically how specific it is. I will say, however, this is another card with the dual victory cards from Intrigue, Harem, Great Halls, Great Mills, and Nobles work fantastic because, for example, if you trashed one of the nobles, or Great Mills or Great Halls, you gain both the duchy and the gold, which is a nice option there. Harems would give you a transmute and a gold, another decent option there. So there's some upgrading in that possibility as well. So if you think if you're using Great Halls and you're running out of options for the Great Halls, then at least you have something to upgrade into, which can make, replace, remodel, and upgrade good synergies following Transmute's effect once you're basically done with Transmute. Now, keep in mind, because with those cards, you don't really want to use them on Transmute. The potion cost basically means it's a zero cost card, essentially. That potion is the only cost to it. If it wasn't a potion, it costs 0. So you want to keep that in mind when you want to take advantage of this. Depending on when you want to play this card, you could play this in any... You could do early game, you could do mid-game, and you could do late game. Early game gives you quick golds very quickly once you have the potion in hand to get rid of those estates. Mid-game to start working on killing off some of those action cards to turn into duchies, which then could turn into golds, or to hold off for more victory points, and basically transmuting treasure cards to gain more transmutes, and then transmuting the transmutes for duchy. You can see what I mean. This can work in any phase of the game. You just want to know the right timing for it. So this is another card which is basically you want to depend heavily on what's on the playing field, and then use the effect to your advantage. It's very specific. But in terms of it being a trash for benefit card, it is technically one of the weakest out there because of the fact it gives you a specific thing for trashing something. So just keep that part in mind. Oh, I will say one more thing about Transmute that is very beneficial. Since you are gaining duchies very quickly, that makes Duke a very viable card, and I would recommend it in that particular case if Duke is available for purchase to use Transmute's effect to gain them as quickly as possible, giving you a better chance to score big time with Duke in those kind of particular games. That's like one unique synergy that works well. Next, we have another gainer card like Ironworks Workshop, but it works a tiny bit differently in this case. University, costing 2 and a potion to purchase, plus 2 actions. You may gain an action card costing up to 5. Now, that gaining is optional, but do keep in mind, when gaining, if there are cards with potion costs, you cannot gain those with this card, so just keep an eye out for that. Now, this can build an engine fairly quickly, depending what's on the playfield, and it is a good option in terms of over Workshop, essentially. It's a much better version of Workshop. Ironworks, I think, is still good on its own, but because you can get an action card costing up a 5, Bridge is a nice synergy on this card, because basically it will open up a lot of possibilities for you, and it's fantastic. Apprentice and Herbalist are good to go off on this card, and it's definitely worth getting a couple of these when you can. Of course, the potion cost is one of its major downsides, so getting more of these is a bit of a slow process when you need to get to draw. But markets, laboratories, even those dual victory cards, they work as well. The attack duration action cards also work, those triple effects. Making Courtier, hello, that's a nice option to pick up as well if it's on the field too. This is useful in the early game to get you the cards you want to set up for your engine, but this is also good in the late game when you want to end this game, because basically you can continuously play off of University to gain cards off of a pile in order to clear the end game condition of clearing 3 piles completely. So University is a nice option to do it, especially if you can keep drawing into them, and +2 actions means you have a lot of options if you can get some draw power in them. Be that as it may, however, you don't have to super rely on it. I mean, basically gain the cards that you want to use, and it's just one option there. But basically your +1 card, +1 action cards are going to be one of the key targets for this, especially when they're empty or at a low point. This is also good in some particular circumstances. Rather than spend unnecessary cash on a potion, you could use a University to grab another potion to be able to get some more alchemy cards. Bear in mind, gaining, it's going to the discard pile, it's not going into your hand. It would stay on the card if that was the case. But this is good for festivals, this is good for markets, torturers, again, apprentices, herbalists, even if you can bridge down you know, bandit or adventurer, any of those, it works out well. This is a good option over workshop to take advantage of, because it gives you not only the extra actions, but gives you a little bit more room to look around and see what there is to offer. And if you bridge into University, hey, works out. There are some cards coming up that I'm going to talk about in the next expansion that go really well with that, and those will be fun. Again, this is a early game or late game card. Mid game, at that point, you probably got something set up, and the piles are still somewhat full, so you might want to take your time until you know you have a good victory point lead. And then when you come into the end game, that's when you want to start killing off these piles while simultaneously picking up some victory points before your opponent can take advantage of them. So, good way to end the game on a quick note. If you get a few of these in your hand, definitely a cool card. And the final card for the Alchemy expansion that we're going to talk about is a new victory card, Vineyard. Costing just a potion to purchase. It is worth 1 victory point per 3 action cards you have, rounded down. I would say this is a bit more of an upgrade over Gardens. It's somewhat similar to the way Duke works, but it's more beneficial for a full action-heavy deck. Now, it just costs a potion, so in order to really benefit from this, you need to get a potion, and you need one every single time you want to purchase a Vineyard. So you're relying heavily on your action cards to do most of the scoring work, and then picking up the Vineyards when you have time for the potions. This makes Transmute a little bit much more of a better option to get more potions and more Transmutes, making it enabling for you to purchase more Vineyards, because with that potion, it basically makes it very difficult to purchase, even with additional plus buys, because you're going to need more than 1 potion in hand, even with a plus buy, to get more than 1 of these cards. It's more useful down the line when you already have your deck set up, but you basically want to make sure you have the potions first before you start getting some green cards in there. And at that point, you don't want to rely entirely on Vineyard unless your deck is powerful enough to do it. While Scrying Pool is a good synergizer for a lot of the action cards for this, Vineyard will stop Scrying Pool from really fully using its effect. However, cards like University, Ironworks, Workshop, those are good cards that are fantastic synergies that get you enough action cards quickly enough to really go bonkers with this card. I would not heavily recommend purchasing more than 1 Vineyard in 1 turn, unless you obviously have the potions, in which case you're probably relying on Transmute a lot to get more potions into your deck. You just want to make sure that you're thinning out some of your other crummier victory cards at that point. So basically trashing any duchies with your trashing cards, especially with Transmute, to get more golds in there. This is a much better card as an option because it's easy enough to get 3 action cards to have 1 victory point. So for this to be really awesome, even, past a duchy, you just need 12 action cards in your deck, which is easily said than done, especially if the deck works out great. But it is relying on your action cards. So having plus actions and plus draw power is what's going to be necessity. If you can't see that on the Kingdom supply piles, Vineyard doesn't really work super well, and I wouldn't be buying more than 1 at that point, because for it to really take off, you really want it to be worth more than 3 victory points. I mean, yeah, you could get it to province level, but you'd have 18 action cards. At that point, they better be providing coin for you, draw power, or extra actions. Otherwise, you're going to be shit out of luck if you keep drawing into the Vineyards. And again, because it only costs a potion, trashing effects by standard for upgrade and replace, or even remodel, it's only going to cost 0. So you're not going to go any more higher than that. So just keep that in mind. Coming in from the future post-editing, I did forget to mention one thing. While I did say this could cause some chaos, there is one workaround if you start throwing into the Vineyards, and that is if Island is available for you to purchase, because then you can just set those aside. That's not being trashed, that's not being exiled. You still have it in your deck at the end of the game, so that will count toward your total. That is a good option and a very viable substitute to really work with Vineyard. This is definitely, while it just costs a potion, mid to late game, when you already have the deck set up, and these victory cards are going to be much more useful for you than grabbing a province. If you have at least an action-heavy deck that you're drawing into every turn, it's going to work well. Kind of keep track of how many action cards you have per deck. If you have at least 18, great. You have basically a province right there. And at that point, it's worth starting to farm these very quickly to thin out the victory piles. Again, since it's a victory card, 8 for 2 players, 12 for 3 or more. And that is the last of the cards for the Alchemy expansion. It is a small expansion. It is not the first small expansion we'll get. There will be others coming up. But the next one we're going to talk about is a big expansion. It is the 4th expansion to be released, and that is Prosperity. And it's one of my personal favorites to ever been released. It has a version 1.0, which we'll talk about in the next video, and a version 2.0 in the form of an update pack, which has yet to be released physically, but it is available online on the Steam version of Dominion. So after checking the video out, go ahead and check those cards out. Well, it's going to have a lot of fun coming up with this. It's also going to change the rules slightly, so keep that in mind. Thanks very much for watching, guys. If you like anything you see here, don't forget to like, comment, and please subscribe. More views, more likes, and more subscribers will help me out a lot. I'd like to see if we can get some discussion here. I know a lot of people have been watching the videos, and I know a couple of people have commented about these and have been looking forward to this. Don't worry, I'm going right to the end. Trust me. You can also follow me on Twitch or Twitter just to see some updates here. I should also have another quickie out later this week on the next promo card, which I will reveal at that point. It'll be a fun one. You'll probably see it in the later part of the week. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!